All right, so are you ready to like really get into this whole health and wellness thing? I mean, we're talking more than just like what's trendy, you know?
Yeah, for sure. It's going way deeper than just the surface level stuff.
Exactly. So we're going to try to cut through all that noise and figure out what actually matters, what actually helps us thrive.
And it's interesting because the sources you've gathered for this deep dive, they take a really holistic approach.
Okay, I like
Yeah.
where this is going. So tell me more about that. Like, what do you mean by holistic?
Well, they're not just looking at physical health, which is obviously important,
Yeah.
but they're also talking about mental and emotional health,
Hmm.
your social life, intellectual curiosity, even spiritual well-being.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. So all these different aspects of our lives are connected to our overall health.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're all intertwined, like you can't really separate them out.
That makes sense.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so where should we start with all of this?
Well, I think it makes sense to begin with the one everyone's most familiar with, physical health.
Okay, so back to the basics, but hopefully with some fresh perspectives from these sources.
Definitely. One thing that really stood out to me was the emphasis on avoiding processed foods.
Interesting. So it's not just about eating healthy in general, it's about being more specific about what we're putting into our bodies.
Right. It's about understanding how those choices directly impact how we feel and function.
I know I'm guilty of grabbing something processed when I'm busy, but the source really emphasizes how those choices add up over time.
Exactly. And
Mhm.
while we're talking about everyday choices, the sources also get specific about exercise.
Okay, so how much exercise are we talking here? Because I feel like there are so many different recommendations out there.
They recommend 150 minutes of moderate activity per week, or you could do 75 minutes of vigorous activity.
All right, so that gives us a good starting point. But why is exercise so important? I mean, I know it's good for us, but what specifically are we getting out of it?
Well, the sources highlight a lot of benefits, like reduced risk of chronic diseases like heart disease and type 2 diabetes.
Okay, yeah, those are some pretty big ones.
They also talk about improved mood, better sleep, stronger bones and muscles.
Wow, so it really is a whole body thing.
Right. And one of the things they connect it back to is stress reduction.
Wait, so working out can actually help me stress less. I always thought it was the other way around.
It can definitely help. And it also ties into sleep, which the sources are very clear about aiming for 7 to 9 hours each night.
Okay, so sleep is non-negotiable according to these
Pretty
sources.
much. They highlight research showing how important it is for everything from your mood and memory to your immune system and even your longevity.
Okay, so exercise for stress relief, sleep for overall health. What else did you find interesting about the physical health aspect?
Well, one thing they talk about is preventative care.
Okay, I can see where this is going, getting those regular checkups and screening.
Exactly. But they frame it as an investment in your future health.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Like you're taking proactive steps to prevent bigger problems down the road.
Right. And it's much easier to manage things when they're caught early.
Absolutely. So we're talking about making those doctor's appointments a priority, not putting them off.
Exactly. Now, this leads us into another really important dimension of well-being, which is mental and emotional health.
Okay, so we've covered the physical basics. Now let's get into the mental and emotional side of things, because I think that's something a lot of people struggle with.
For sure. And it's often overlooked or downplayed.
So why do you think it's so important to focus on mental and emotional health?
Well, the sources argue that it's the foundation for everything else. Like if you're constantly stressed or anxious or emotionally drained, it's going to affect every other area of your life.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like you can't really function at your best if you're not feeling good mentally and emotionally.
Exactly. And one of the key points they make is that it's healthy to acknowledge and process your emotions.
I think a lot of us are taught to just push those feelings down and pretend they're not there.
Yeah, and that can actually be really harmful. It can lead to more stress and even physical health problems.
So we need to find healthy ways to deal with those emotions. But how do we do that? What do the sources suggest?
Well, they talk about stress management techniques like meditation, deep breathing exercises, and yoga.
Okay, so those are some pretty common suggestions, but do they really work?
There's actually a lot of research showing how effective they can be. Like they can actually change your brain chemistry, reducing anxiety and boosting your resilience.
Interesting. So it's not just about feeling relaxed in the moment, it's about creating lasting changes in your brain.
Right. And even a few minutes of deep breathing each day can make a difference.
Okay, I can definitely try that. What about mindfulness? I hear that word a lot, but I'm not always sure what it actually means.
Basically, it means being present in the moment without judgment, like paying attention to your thoughts and feelings without getting carried away by them.
So instead of replaying that awkward conversation in my head for the 100th time, I should focus on enjoying my dinner.
Exactly. And the research shows that mindfulness can reduce anxiety, improve your outlook, and even strengthen your relationships.
Okay, That's pretty convincing. So we've talked about physical health and the mental and emotional side of things. But what about our social life? How does that fit into the picture?
Well, that's where things get really fascinating. You might be surprised to learn that strong social connections can actually improve your physical health.
Wait, really? So hanging out with my friends is actually good for my body?
It can be. The sources highlight studies showing that people with strong social ties tend to have lower blood pressure, stronger immune systems, and even recover faster from illness.
Wow, I had no idea the connection was that strong. So it's not just about feeling less lonely, it's about actually improving our physical health. I'm sold. But how do we go about building those quality connections?
That's a great question, and it's something we'll delve into more after the break.
All right, I can't wait to hear more about that when we come back. So stay tuned, we'll be right back.
So we were talking about building those strong social connections and like, how do we actually do that?
Yeah. Yeah, because it's easy to say, oh, yeah, I need to be more social, but then life gets in the way. And it's like, how do I actually make time for those connections?
Well, one thing the sources emphasize is that it takes effort. Like it's an investment, you know?
Okay, an investment in my social life. What does that look like?
It's about being intentional with your time and energy, making an effort to reach out to people, nurturing those relationships.
So it's not just about like showing up at a party or having a ton of social media followers. It's about deeper connections, right?
Exactly. And one interesting point they make is that getting involved in your community can be a really powerful way to build those connections.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like when you're working with others towards a common goal, you naturally form bonds.
Right. And it also gives you a sense of purpose, which is another key aspect of well-being.
So it's not just about individual happiness, it's about feeling connected to something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. And that feeling of belonging can be really powerful for both our mental and physical health.
Okay, I'm convinced about the benefits of strong social connections, but how do we actually make that happen? Like, are we talking about joining clubs, volunteering? What are some practical steps?
Well, they talk about some really simple but powerful skills like active listening and open communication.
Okay, I feel like those are things we hear a lot, but maybe we don't always practice them as well as we could.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in our own thoughts and not really be present when we're interacting with others.
So, active listening means really paying attention to what the other person is saying, both their words and their body language.
Exactly. And not just waiting for your turn to talk, but actually trying to understand their perspective.
And then open communication means being honest and expressing our own thoughts and feelings in a respectful way.
Right. It's about creating a safe space for both people to share openly and authentically.
I can see how that would lead to much stronger and more fulfilling relationships.
Definitely. And these skills can be applied to all kinds of relationships, not just romantic ones, but also friendships, family, work, colleagues.
Okay, so we've talked about physical health, mental and emotional well-being, and our social lives. But there's another dimension we haven't touched on yet, which is intellectual wellness.
Right. And I think this one is often misunderstood.
Mm.
People might think it's just about being super smart or academic,
Yeah, I think a lot of people might roll their eyes and be like, oh, great, another thing I should be doing.
but it's really not about that at all. It's more about staying curious and engaged with the world around you.
So it's about keeping our minds sharp and active, not just in a formal education setting.
Exactly. And they highlight all sorts of activities that can contribute to intellectual wellness, like trying new hobbies, reading for pleasure, doing puzzles, even just staying informed about current events.
Okay, that sounds a lot more approachable than I was expecting. Like, I love doing crossword puzzles. Does that count?
Absolutely. It's about challenging yourself mentally and keeping that sense of curiosity alive.
I feel like when I'm learning new things, I have more energy and I'm more engaged with life in general.
Right. It's like your whole perspective shifts and you start seeing the world in new ways.
And that brings us to the final dimension of well-being, which can be the little bit more personal spiritual wellness.
Yeah, this one can be tricky because it means different things to different people.
I'll admit I'm a little skeptical when I hear the word spiritual because it can be so vague.
I get it. And the sources acknowledge that right away, they're not talking about any specific religion or dogma.
Okay, so what are they talking about then?
It's more about finding your own sense of meaning and purpose, connecting to something bigger than yourself.
So it's more about that feeling of connection than about any specific beliefs or rituals.
Exactly. And they suggest that spiritual wellness can be cultivated through practices like reflection, gratitude, spending time in nature.
You know, when I'm feeling stressed out, spending time outdoors always helps me feel more grounded.
Yeah, there's something about connecting with nature that can be really restorative.
It's like a reset button for my soul.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that what resonates with one person might be totally different for someone else.
Right. So it's about finding what works for you, what helps you feel that sense of connection and purpose.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that this sense of purpose can evolve over time.
That's a good reminder to be open to exploring different paths and not be afraid to redefine what spiritual wellness means to me personally.
Absolutely. And that actually ties into a larger theme that runs through all of these dimensions.
Yeah.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Yeah. We've talked about a lot of different things today, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed like I need to be doing all of these things perfectly.
But the sources are very clear that it's okay to have off days, to slip up, to not be perfect.
So it's more about consistency over time than about being perfect in every moment.
Exactly. And they even suggest that beating ourselves up for those slip-ups can actually be counterproductive.
So self-compassion is key.
Absolutely. It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer to a good friend.
I think that's something a lot of us could work on, myself included. We're often our own worst critics.
Right? And that kind of negative self-talk can really sabotage our efforts to make positive changes.
So how do we shift that mindset? How do we cultivate more self-compassion?
Well, they suggest practices like mindfulness, meditation, journaling, basically anything that helps you become more aware of your thoughts and feelings and to start challenging those negative thought patterns.
So instead of saying, oh, I'm such a failure because I skipped my workout today, I might say, hey, it's okay. Everyone has off days. I'll try again tomorrow.
Exactly. It's about being gentle with yourself and recognizing that you're doing the best you can.
Okay, so self-compassion is a big one. What else can we do to make those positive changes stick?
Well, they also talk about the importance of setting realistic goals.
That makes sense. I know I've been guilty of setting these huge goals and then getting discouraged when I don't achieve them right away.
Right. It's like trying to run a marathon before you've even gone for a jog.
Exactly. So we need to break those big goals down into smaller, more manageable steps.
And focus on building sustainable habits over time.
It's about those small wins that keep you motivated and moving forward.
Right. And celebrating those successes along the way, even if they seem small.
Okay, so we've got self-compassion, realistic goals. Is there anything else we can do to support ourselves on this journey?
Well, they also talk about the importance of finding support, whether it's from friends, family, a therapist, or a support group. Having people to cheer us on and hold us accountable can make a huge difference.
It's like having a team in your corner rooting for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes just knowing that you're not alone in this can make all the difference.
I think a lot of people struggle with asking for help. They feel like they should be able to handle everything on their own.
But the sources emphasize that it's actually a sign of strength to reach out for support.
It's like admitting that you don't have all the answers and that's okay.
Exactly. And sometimes we need that outside perspective to help us see things more clearly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've talked about physical health, mental and emotional well-being, social connections, intellectual wellness, spiritual growth, self-compassion, realistic goals, and the importance of support. It's a lot to take in.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's all connected, and it's all important.
And ultimately, it's about finding what works for you, what helps you feel your best.
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to health and wellness. It's a very personal journey.
And that's what makes it so fascinating. It's a constant process of learning, growing, and evolving.
And the sources we've explored today encourage us to approach that journey with curiosity, compassion, and a willingness to experiment.
Yes, it's about being open to trying new things,
Yeah.
seeing what resonates with us, and making adjustments along the way.
And remembering that it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress.
And celebrating those wins, both big and small.
Absolutely. So as you continue on your own health and wellness journey, remember to be kind to yourself, stay curious, and never stop exploring.
Those are some great words to live by. So that's it for this deep dive into health and wellness. I hope you feel inspired and empowered to take those small steps towards a healthier, happier, and more fulfilling life. Until next time, keep learning and keep taking care of you.
Well, they talk about self-compassion. Like, we tend to be so hard on ourselves.
Yeah, it's like we expect perfection, and then when we inevitably fall short, we just beat ourselves up about it.
Exactly. And that kind of negative self-talk, it can really sabotage our efforts. You know?
So how do we shift that mindset? How do we start being more compassionate with ourselves?
Well, they suggest practicing mindfulness, like noticing those negative thoughts and then gently challenging them.
So instead of saying, oh, I'm so lazy for skipping my workout, I might say, hey, it's okay, I'll try again tomorrow.
Right. It's about recognizing that you're human, you're not perfect, and that's okay.
I think that's a really important point because we often hold ourselves to these impossibly high standards.
And then we end up feeling discouraged and giving up altogether.
So self-compassion is key. But what about when we know what we should be doing, but we just can't seem to make it happen?
Well, they also talk about the importance of setting realistic goals. Like, instead of trying to change everything at once,
Yeah.
start with one small thing.
Yeah, I've definitely been guilty of trying to do too much at once and then burning out.
It's like trying to climb a mountain in one giant leap.
Yeah.
Instead, break it down into smaller steps.
And focus on building those healthy habits over time.
Exactly. It's about consistency, not intensity.
Okay, so self-compassion, realistic goals, anything else that can help us stay on track.
Well, they also talk about finding support, like having people in your corner who can cheer you on and hold you accountable.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Having a support system can make all the difference.
Whether it's friends, family, a therapist, or a support group, just knowing that you're not alone can be really helpful.
It's like having a team of cheerleaders encouraging you every step of the way.
Exactly. And sometimes we all need a little help to stay motivated and on track.
So we've covered a lot in this deep dive. We talked about physical health, mental and emotional well-being, social connections, intellectual curiosity, spiritual growth, self-compassion, realistic goals, and the importance of support. It's been a really insightful journey.
And I think the biggest takeaway is that health and wellness, it's not a destination. It's a journey.
Exactly. It's about constantly learning, growing, and evolving.
And finding what works for you.
Because there's no one-size-fits-all approach to this stuff.
Right. It's about listening to your body, paying attention to your needs, and making choices that support your overall well-being.
And I think the sources we've explored today have given us some great tools and strategies to help us do just that.
So as you continue on your own journey, remember to be kind to yourself. Stay curious and never stop exploring.
And don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
Absolutely. We're all in this together.
That's it for this deep dive into health and wellness. I hope you feel inspired and empowered to live your best life. Until next time, keep learning and keep taking care of you.